Buen dia, buon tardi, buon noche everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm gonna do something a little bit different. I'm going to calculate how much I need for this coming month, but I'm going to do it differently from my usual system, which I'm going to show you at the end how I usually do it. And the reason for that is I have a small problem. Things have gotten a little more expensive, so I went a little bit over, so I need to adjust things accordingly to catch up. You know, life happens and it brings its challenges here and there. I'm not going to get into the details about it. All you need to know is I'm going to calculate what I need to have for this month. Hopefully it goes well this month, and we'll see how it goes this time. If I need to keep it in the new system that I'm going to try out, or if I can go back to how I normally do it. Hopefully I can go back to how I normally do it, because I calculated it precisely to work with what I'm doing, because I'm currently saving money for paying off my debts, or my debt, in this case, student loans. So, I guess it's not that bad, but I shouldn't make a habit out of it either. Because you see, I've conditioned my brain to ignore what I have already saved up in the bank, and that's another story for another time, or else this intro will be way too long. So when I budget, I focus only on my income that I get each month, even though I have quite a considerable amount in the bank saved up from what I used to do previously. But again, story for another time. Let's just jump right into it. I've been taking inspiration from other budgeters on YouTube on how to do it, and I'm going to do part of the method that Paula budget does. I'm going to start off with writing down I had every month, so what I spent every month beginning from November 2024. So last year, November, December, and then this year, January. Because we're still in February, I cannot count it in yet. Let's do that. And this comes back with what I said in the previous video. Education. Education, you can't really see it. This education is what I was talking about last time. This is what it comes to, my student loan. When I started budgeting, that was in November, I started keeping in mind I need to pay for the student loan. So even though officially I started saving for the half of the amount in January, I actually started in November. So I'm 2 months ahead, in case it ended up needing a little more than what I actually saved this year. Because, and this is what I'm going to reveal, I'm not going to reveal the amount, like the whole amount that I owe, but I need to pay every month basic $1,204 floating. So that's standard. Everything else, it kind of shifts around. So let's go for this. Hold on, let me put this line here. expense for expenses. Let me write down. So that's the expenses. Next up, income. Forgot to get my red pen. Now, we're going in total. I'm gonna write it in red. Hopefully you can, no, you can't see what I'm doing. Perfect. Hold on. Sorta. And the pen doesn't want to write. Great. There we go. Total of this is 2, 3, 2, 9, 25. Right. And this, it amounts to 2, 3, 5, 0, and 44 cents. Right. That's the first step. Now we gotta do this for everyone else. Okie dokies, I'm back. So this is what I've been doing while off camera. I've finished filling everything in. So the expenses, the income, I filled in the total. For this one, it's 2,329 and 25 cents. The income 2,350 and 44 cents. The difference is, so for the difference, I need to calculate the difference of those. That's income minus expense. I was left with 21.19. I did the same thing for December and January. For December, the only difference with December that December has with the other 2 months is that I got an extra bonus. Let's write it down so I don't forget. Bonus, which made the outcome, the sum, to be 3,050 and 44 cents. The expense was 3,324 and 70 cents, so we're 274 and 26 over. And January, same thing, minus the bonus, and that leaves us with 3,654 with 9 cents, and the same income, 2,350 and 44, with the difference being 1,303 with 65 cents, which is a lot over. But if we remember my very first video, I think it was my very first video, yes, I had to take out extra and spend extra because I had to make the bonus from December last all throughout January as well. So that happened. I was paid in the middle of the month of December, so hence why it was a little hard. Now for the next step is to set up the general budget. Alright, I'm back. I've filled in the categories. These, I summed up the 3 months with each category. So November, December, January for food is 962 and 45, etc., etc. The total down here, even though I don't have to, but I kind of do it because I do it here, and I want to make sure everything's like in order. And this I divided by, in my case, 3 months. I get this amount, and this you need a total 4, at least according to Paula's method. And here is where you're supposed to plan out how many you got, this like an average of every month that you spent. But here is where you're going to figure out, oh, I'm going to make it a little more, I have to make it a little less, depending on what you need. I already did that off camera, and education stays the same. I'm not going to change it. I need to keep the train rolling if I want to pay off my debt. So I got that all calculated, and all of this, I had to do all of this keeping in mind my previous amounts that I had for each category. Also keeping in mind this, the education part, and my income, which is, you saw, $2,350.44. This one, it went a little over. It went a little over with 4 floating, but that's perfectly fine. That's reasonable, perfectly fine. Why do I say it's perfectly fine, even though I told you earlier that I've tricked my brain into thinking that I only get $2,350.44 to work with? Because for this time, I kept in mind, just for this time, to make this calculation less stressful, I kept in mind that I still have the buffer that I told you about. I still have the buffer, and it's only 4 floating. I'm not going to make this a habit. This was just to adjust the budgeting amounts that I put for every category. Nothing else. Now, this is where I deviate from Paula's system. Because normally she would go to fixed expenses, then variable expenses, and from there she can calculate her budget. However, the way I'm going to do this is I made a system for my own system. It is all of these. It is these categories, from gifts all the way up to food. I keep education in mind. I keep it in mind. But the amount I put for food, shopping, dining, hair, health, apartment, lending, pets, miscellaneous, emergency, and gifts, it all amounts to this little equation. Hope you can still see what I'm writing down. My income, which is this. My income, I leave out the 44 cents. I take what I need for my student loan. I subtract that from my income, which is $12.04, like this. That will give me $11.46. This is the magical number that I need, or at least a magical number that I keep in mind when I'm figuring out what I'm going to put for all of these. That's my system. That was for the first time. For November, I did 200, 250, 100, 150 for help, 200, 300, 255, 25, 200, and 50 for everything. That's when I started out. And then I had a minimum planned of 200, 200, 25, 50, 50, 200, 50, 125, 25, 200, and 50. That was the minimum. The maximum, so what I started off in November, would all amount to 1,700. That's the maximum. Again, keeping in mind and kind of ignoring the buffer I have in my bank account. But I would preferably ignore the buffer so I can keep using the magical number or close to it. Hence why the minimum would, I added up the minimum, and it would come down to 1,175, which is a little over this, but it's acceptable. However, I decided this time, rather than counting what I did a calculation video a couple days ago. Instead of taking those amounts and plugging them in, I actually use a system that requires, or not actually requires, but I make it easier for myself. I use Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel, it's the same thing, to help me calculate it faster. But I'm going to put it down for those who would like to look at it, maybe use it, or to help you guys understand how I normally do it. I decided this time I would deviate from it. And instead of taking the amounts that I calculated before in the previous video, that I calculated whatever I had in the binder, this time I used Paula's system, and I'm taking the average of every category in the month, with the exception of education, that stays 1,204. I would add it into my system. Okay, dokies. This is the table, the Google Sheets table that I was talking about earlier. As you can see, I've already filled it in. This is the maximum that I was talking about. So what I started off with in November of last year, 2024. This was the minimum that I calculated at that time. So you can see the maximum 1,700, minimum 1,175. And this is how I came up with the ideal level, 1,146, which is my salary minus the 44 cents, which is 100%, minus the student loan, which is a little over 50% of my salary, and I'm left with 49% to work with. This is something that I've calculated at the time that I was preparing to start my budgeting journey in November. The maximum, the minimum, the current amount, this, as you can see, I've filled in what I've done in the table with Paula's system. And normally here, my normal system here, normally I would have, for example, if by, say, the end of the month, I was left over, for example, say I was left over 150, then I would put it in here. So 150 for food, put it in here. And whatever I'm left, what I have in my binder, which I've calculated a couple days ago, that would normally be in here. And it would tell me how much I need to add, if I need to add, to my binder for the coming month. And the way that I've programmed this is as follows. You can, when I click here, double click, it'll show you what I'm talking about. It highlights in the table the cells and what they're supposed to be, what's supposed to be done with them. Down here, for those who understand how to work with Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel, this is the formula that I use. So for example, in order to know if it's a yes or a no, it would look at what I filled in the current amount and see if it's either smaller or equal to what's been added in the maximum amount. So in this case, 188 is larger than the maximum. So it would tell me, no, 188 isn't smaller or equal to 50. It's larger. So it would tell me no here. And what happens is follows. Since I programmed here to tell me an amount based on what's written in here, it would tell me if I would have to use the maximum or the minimum. So it tells me if the current amount is larger than the maximum amount, I would have to add 25. So the minimum amount, I would have to add that. If the current amount, however, is smaller than the maximum amount, it would tell me to add the maximum amount. So that would be 50. And lastly, if the current amount is the same as the maximum amount, it would tell me not to add anything. So it will remain 0. And as you can see here, since this one is larger than this one, it would tell me add 25. However, since it's telling me here, no, don't add anything, it's going to remain 0. That's basically how the whole table works. And as you can see here in shopping, it would do the whole same thing that I just explained with dining. However, since here there's 100 extra because I noticed that I was missing 100 for some reason. Maybe I've bought something and I didn't write it down. So when I calculate my the amounts that I have in the binder, it didn't come out the way I expected it to. So it would have been 100 less. So what happens is this, I would write it down here. So however much I'm missing, I would add it here, and it would be counted extra. So along with all of the formulas, what they tell me to do, plus the extra. And that's what this one is supposed to calculate. So you can see here, it says, if this is saying to me yes, then I would have to take however much is in here plus however much is in here, and that becomes the amount that I need to put in. However, if it says no in here, then it would just remain 0. In this case, it's 300. So since it says yes, I need to add 200. I have to plus the extra, and it would come down to this amount. Another thing I wanted to add was it tells me down here, it sums up whatever I have in the cells above it. Here too, the sum product of these amounts to that. And an interesting thing about this is if I didn't have that 100 extra here, I would have fallen within the margins, because you have the maximum and you have the minimum. If anything in between is within the acceptable margins for me. So 1,675 would have been within the margins, but because of the extra 100, I would have to add that. And I would have to make sure next month that I would have to at least save 50 if I want to stay within the margins. I'm going to try and make it work. This time I would let it slide, but normally I would not have it. I would have preferred to go with this. Right now, I need to do it this way to make sure everything is back in order. I hope that was clear enough what I was trying to explain earlier in the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed this boring, probably, video, but intriguing at the same time. And I want to thank Paula Budgets, and I hope she doesn't mind that I used her system a little bit to help me figure out what to do with myself. And I hope you guys have a nice week ahead or weekend, which whenever it is you guys watch this video, and take care. And I would say, Temasoro.